Hello guys, hi, my name is Vibhor Bansal. I am from NASSCOM products team. As you are aware, this is a third episode of our webinar series on product management in association in partnership with SAP. And we have done first episode on the product thinking, second on product vision. Now third, we're gonna talk about defining the market and market problems. Today we have with us Alok Shukla, who is a senior director for product management at Imperva. He runs the product management at Imperva for application security portfolio. He's been into the product management roles for last 9 years and in security space for last 14 years at various and diverse companies such as McAfee, iPolicy Network, Quark, SafeNet. He's an MBA from IIM Bangalore and he is joining us from San Francisco Bay Area. Uh, in today's session, we're going to talk about defining market and market problems. And I will not come in between you and Alok any further. I'll hand it over to Alok, and who will take this presentation. You can type your questions in the chat box or in the question box. You can also we will take these questions towards the end of the Alok's presentation. Okay, so one more request. After this webinar, you will receive an auto-generated email with a survey. Please do send us your feedback. That helps us to, improvise further on your experience of these webinars. Alok, over to you.
Thank you, Vibhor. And thanks everybody who has joined in. This is Alok Shukla, and I'm your today's presenter for this series of product management learning webinar. We call it episode 3, defining market problems. And so let's jump right in. So this is me. As Vibhor just introduced me, I run product management and Imperva for application security. My role is focused on application security for public and private cloud and the hybrid clouds. My primary focus is on product strategy. My team is responsible for the business of application security in public and private clouds. I'm a very big proponent of design thinking, and from a domain perspective, I am a big believer of cloud security, and that's my area of interest as of today. I run a blog. It's called tropicaltalk.wordpress.com. I write pretty on and off, and there are a few blogs that you might find of interest on various different topics. So let's move to the topic of the day. So on the definition of market problems, one of the things that I want in any of my team members or any product manager who is coming to this space is that when you are doing this, you should not be the one who are sensing by yourself and you're not able to explain it to anybody. Just don't be that guy. We would have come across many times a scenario that we start to see things in a way we believe there's an opportunity. We're just not able to explain that. We're just not able to provide a structure to our thought process and how we came up with that. We're not able to take along, but we just know that there is something. And that is, it looks very exciting, but that's not the way you take your organization along. That's not the way you structure your thought process in your day-to-day work. So just don't be that guy. So let's move on to what could be a way in which we can define or structure our thought process, or our analysis to discover a market problem, do it in a way that is structured, and do it in a way that we can come to a reliable conclusion which is backed by data, which is backed by analysis. So in my next slide, I will propose a couple of steps here. So how do you go about defining market problems? So I will propose a series of 4 steps in which you do that. And each of those steps has their own sub-steps in which you can go about that. So let's start with these 4. I will say number 1 is discovering the problems. And you might say that, no, I understand it. Somebody will tell me that this is the problem statement and we should be doing this, or some in your enterprise, some of you are enterprise PMs, and in enterprise PM, one of the sales engineers will come to you and say, my customers are saying this, and you will, yeah, that's a problem statement, I start, right, jump in. But we'll talk about that, how we can improve even on that. Then you go to the next step, start defining use cases, and you describe what you hear in a form that can be translated into a use case definition. Then you start to understand what are the alternates, what are the substitutes, who are the other players who can solve this problem, what are the other ways these problems could be solved. And then at the final level, you start to take everything into account and you say, this is the market problem, this is the market that it is focusing on, this is a high level solution. I mean, not in the sense of solution, but at least at a very high level, saying this is, if this would be the problem, this could be potentially the high level solution. And then you say that, why does it matter? So if these are the 4 steps, let's jump into each one of them as we go along. So let's go into the slides for discovering problems. So here is, when we talk about discovering problems, these are the 3 steps I propose for any PM work, who is, whether you are in consumer space or in enterprise space, how do you go about it? So the number 1 step, and this is, I cannot emphasize enough, is the need to talk to customers, need to be, and customers can be, if you are in an enterprise space, your enterprise customers, or it could be normal consumers, in the sense of whether you're looking at them through data or you're directly talking to them in focus groups. But the most important thing is to listen unaided. And when I say unaided, which means that you're just asking them to share their thought process. It may not be structured thought, it may be unstructured thought, but the idea is to just listen. And when you listen continuously over a long period of time, a pattern starts to emerge. They will be saying something, they would be describing their experiences of a solution, of an area, of a focus point, and you will start to see some primary data. And just to kind of focus here, whether you are, let's say in an enterprise case, the customer could be your direct user, could be a buyer, and in some cases users and buyer may be different. They might be influencers, they might be anyone who has an opinion. Your sales engineer, for example, in enterprise cases, is somebody who has an opinion, your executive has an opinion, your marketing team has an opinion. If you're in a consumer space, then let's say somebody who in the family is buying is maybe who is a direct user of your products, but there might be people in the family who might have an opinion. There might be people in the distribution chain who might have an opinion. Just listen. And listen, and when I say listen, it's not only about talking to people, but also looking at data that is coming in. And once you do that, then you go to the next steps. What do these opinions, what do these data are saying something to you? You start to develop hypotheses then. And I made a very important point. You listen first and then develop hypotheses. A lot of us go into listening mode with an hypothesis, and that will lead you to groupthink. That sometimes will not be, that won't allow you to see things that you might have seen if you had not gone unaided. Anyways, you go that, then you take those hypotheses, then you go back to the same customers and you say, this is what I learned from you, this is what I heard when you were talking to me first. or this is the data that told me, can you revalidate that? So then you start to get more colors into that hypothesis. If it is valid or not, that's the first question. And if it is valid, what are the more details around that hypothesis? What are the colors of that problem statement? So that allows you to reduce errors in terms of the hypothesis that you build. You might change it, you might expand it, you might convert it into something else. So that's the way you start to have a sense of problem and sense of very well formed problem that is based on primary data that you collected, that you created, and is also backed by the secondary data that other people would have been saying. So let's move to the next step now. So you have discovered problems here. What do you do with that? So one of the things which I said previously is once you have developed a hypothesis which is based on primary data, and I was saying things to you that anybody can have an opinion. It could be a user, it could be a customer, it could be other people in the distribution chain. And the way we classify them is they are to be called as personas. And each persona would have a different take on describing the same problem statement. So for example, let's say you are in a home buying segment, you are in a consumer area, not an enterprise. You may have mother as the buyer and the kid as the user. And both of them may have different takes on what they are looking from a problem statement perspective. The user might have a detailed sense of problem, but the buyer has a very deciding influence on what could be bought, what could not be, and they might have their additional use cases. So have a view based on the persona is extremely important so that you understand not only the person who's having a problem, but the other things which can influence the purchase process and the use process of a problem statement that you're trying to solve. So once you do that, you need to develop use case for each persona. As I said, user is central. And what use case means is that if a user would like to have a functionality so that he or she can get such a benefit. And in this case, the person who is providing you a use case, again, has to be for a different persona. Now, you will get a lot of use cases. But one of the things at this point of time, you have to understand whether most of these use cases that you are getting are consistent or are they aligned to the company goal. And company goal, the organization that you work in, it might have a goal, it might exist in an arena, and it has a stated goal. For example, you might be in a device manufacturer company, and your organization has a mandate to create devices that are consumer friendly. And if somebody tells you that you have to get into the stores business, or you have a use case where might potentially a customer is asking you to do something which is outside of your core competency or core goal of creating devices, you have to take a hard look whether you want to go deep into those use cases. Even if you are not going, it's still a valuable idea to classify such use cases that align with your core goal or with they are not aligned with your core goal. The reason why it is important is that based on that, those use cases may be classified as their feature extension, if this is a new market that you can enter, or this is adjacency, or it's completely off the charts. And this is important at this point of time. So let's go into the next step now. So you would have a collection of use cases which are actually describing the problem statement. And let's go to the next level. What you do now, you will understand the alternate. And this is crucial. And I've seen in my experience a lot of MPMs make this mistake of jumping from use case directly to a problem statement. This step is extremely important from what you call as a feedback perspective or sanity check. The first thing is this: there might be a valuable problem statement, there might be very valid use cases, they may be aligned, But suddenly you discover that customers have a workaround, and the workaround is cheap enough for them to solve their problem statements without you needing to do anything big. And sometimes when that happens, you will suddenly realize that it may not be worth our while to even invest efforts. You might just point to the user that is good enough. And that's also a point of testing your hypothesis that would you go with this workaround? Would this be good enough, or do I have to do something? You can also would have to get a sense that who in your competitive space is more suited to solve that particular problem statement or use case. This gives you a sense of what is your unique capability as an organization that can solve these use cases better than your competitors, and who have a distinct advantage, maybe from a distribution chain perspective, maybe a technology perspective. It's important to know that. And once you understand that, you have a very good sense of how solid this problem statement is, how solid is your position in the market is in terms of solving this problem. So let's now we have identified the problem, we have identified the use cases. We also understand the alternates. What are the alternate paths if we were not to provide a solution to this as an organization? Once we have an understanding, we could do the final step now. At this point of time, we start to define the problem at a much high clarity. First of all, we define the problem statement. It should be possible to define it at the best is to define in a one single sentence, but if not that, in a couple of statements. You might say, this is what customer wants. And in bottom of that, you basically describe then for each of the persona which you have encountered, there might be a principal persona, principal user, then there might be a buyer persona, there might be influencers. You can describe the problem statement in different ways, but still there should be an overall problem statement. And if you solve that problem statement, there should be a clear-cut benefit that would be provided to each of the persona. That has to be provided. If you can't articulate a benefit of solving that problem statement for a user, you need to go back to the step one, because you would have made a mistake there. And once you do that, you should be able to say that what could be a high-level solution to this problem statement. You understand this, you might be taking this definition of problem statement to a wider audience within your organization. And if you can't articulate, and for them to understand your problem, you need to be able to tell that this could be a possible solution that allows them to start thinking very creatively and to understand the scope of the problem. And this is important at this point of time. So and if you have a very well-defined problem statement, that should automatically lead to a very good solution statement. And one of my very good suggestion here is avoid feature level discussion. And I mean, if you can stop that, that would be great, because more you are at a definition of problem, more you remain at a high level. That allows your discussion to be more strategic. You will go into feature level discussion, but only once you have passed the smell test, passed the sanity test on the high level. That's what you're trying to do here. Then you go to the next step 3. So let's say you say that if we were to solve this problem with such a high level solution, what does that mean? Is it a completely new offering in the market? Or is it competitive where you as your customer do not have the solution, but your competitor has? And remember, in the step 3, you did that. And or it might be that it's a table stakes. What table stakes essentially means is that your customers are not going to continue using your product if you do not have such offering, because everybody else offers this. This is not going to give you a competitive advantage, but if you don't have such a feature, customer might stop using you. So you should know that the problem that you're trying to solve, where does it lie? Of course, everybody wants to look at a blue ocean. A blue ocean essentially means an offering that you're introducing, which creates a completely new market and no competitor exists there. That would happen once in a while, but most of the time you will find some competitive thing, or a lot of time you will find table stakes things. So you should know where it is. And then one of the things that you have to answer for your organization is why does it matter? And why does it matter for your organization for you to solve this problem for the customer? And that has to be described in some metric that affects the financial health or the growth of the company, which it means that it would allow you to sustain a market, it will allow you to enter a new market, it will allow you to earn that much amount of dollars, it will allow you to have a growth, allow more engagement, allow more user, whatever business you are in, you need to answer that question, why should it matter for your company? And if you have all this information, you have a very good structure of definition of a market. You have defined a problem statement. You have to you basically understand your positioning, so you understand the market. You also define why does it matter, and you also have described the high-level solution. And remember this: I have consciously avoided how it would be priced, how it would be sold. I'm not talking about that because this is something not part of our scope. More you start going to this, that how it will be sold, how it will price, you have a conscious assumption that the problem statement that you have described and the solution that the proposal that you have described is valid. We are not at that point. Once we are defining a market problem, we have to be very strict with and ensuring that we understand the opportunity in the strategic context and whether it's worth a while. Only after once we have an agreement at this level, we have defined a problem and the market around it, and there is a wider agreement within an organization that's the right thing to do, then everything else becomes a tactic. So this is where we should be. So these are the 4 steps which you have discovered a problem, you have validated it, and you have set it up, and you have defined the market here. So this was the scope of what we wanted to do as part of this discussion. So let's take an example, and I will go to the example slide now. So let's say, and the example I'm taking is we have to just define an alarm clock for blind folks. Let's say, and we will go to this, there are some assumptions that I've taken here, and we'll go to the 4 steps process that we have done here. We start with this, that there are a couple of assumptions I'm taking. Number 1, that, for example, I, as an individual, work for a small electronic device manufacturer who creates some kind of hardware, who is known for a great hardware engineering base, and it can come to the market with some kind of a solution. And there's an assumption that when I'm continuously talking to my customers or my sales folks or the people around that, there is just some kind of feedback that I used to get that we have a lot of partially blind folks that have struggled with the need of timeliness. Like they are not able to be on time on some of the things, and they are looking for some kind of a help. At this point of time, you don't know whether it makes sense to you or not. So you develop the hypothesis as a product manager. Okay, looks like there's a need for a device, because I come from this device organization that can help blind folks specifically with time issues. And this is my hypothesis. Then I go back. Now I've started talking to specific, might be the potential users, and I design the questions in a way that do you need a task scheduler or reminder device that would be useful? And once they say, either they will say yes or no, and if they say yes, then you start to understand, so in what context, how it should help you. You not only talk to the user, you might talk to the family members who might be surrounding them. If such a device is required, if it is, would you also have a need from this? You will ask the supplier chain, you will ask a lot of people. As I said, whoever has an opinion who is relevant to this conversation, you will do that. Now come to the next step. Let's assume that hypothesis test was successful and you came to the next step from a use case development. You found out there was a customer and a user. In most of the cases, it was a blind person, a partially blind person, who is your customer, who is also, is of course the user here. And there are other users that you discovered were the rest of the family members. So what the partially blind person is saying is that I need a device that can be easily programmed. and have it always near me so that it can tell me, I can hear the alarm, and it can tell me what I need to do when I need to do. And of course, what they're saying is it should be always present so that they are not late for an activity they were supposed to do. Now, there are secondary users, as I said, the persona, and they're saying is, look, I'm not partially blind, but I also, if I'm in the family, if there's an alarm clock, let's say, I should also be able to operate in the way that I'm normally can do. So not only a blind person can use, I also should be able to use. So that takes care of the different personas. Look, there were two personas and both of them had a need. I was able to add more colors to the persona, had more use cases. Now let's look at what are the things that are substitute. Of course, a daily alarm clock is substitute. Some of the folks would have trained themselves to use a daily alarm clock. They could have taken the help of the family members or set up the clock for themselves. But guess what? Now the idea would be a blind person or partially blind person would like to be self-sufficient. So that may not, so it looks like there's an opportunity which this current substitute may not be able to solve. But then we have alternates. A Google Home device could be voice programmed, or Alexa device could be voice programmed to work as an alternate. We have an alternate, but it looks like they might be expensive. So there is a scope of creating something which is cheap, which is better than a daily alarm clock, which is cheaper than these Google Home Alexa devices, but should be able to program to do something about it. So here it comes. So it looks like we come to the last step, where we are defining the problem statement based on multiple use cases. There is a need of programmable alarm clock. That's what. And the reason why, and the solution proposal that in your mind is, it of course came from this journey that you are having is maybe a voice control, because the voice is the medium for a partially blind person, which is more strong at, and he will say that I should be able to program an alarm clock, and alarm clock should be able to respond and should be able to set that, but it should be also able to function as a normal alarm clock, which other people in the family can use. And it should be at a right price point, let's say 500 INR at this point of time. Now, the question that you're asking is it a blue ocean opportunity? You're creating a new market here. Is the size of opportunity worth $10 million because that's the minimum size in which you take any new hardware project? So these are some of the things you answered, and you set it up. What you set up the problem statement nicely from a competitive point of view, from the opportunity point of view, and the market that you're going to play. You have a very good sense of what are your what is your market and what they're saying it about it. So this is an example that we ran by. Hopefully it was useful for you guys. So let's do a review here. Give me a sense. So here is what we said. We said you have a 4-step process. You discover the problem, you develop use case, you define alternates, and finally you define the problem statement with a solution, with what is the opportunity and why does it matter. And I want to kind of focus here. Your customer is your starting point, and you need to be unbiased in your first discovery, and you should always validate the problem statement. More you do that, more you can stand behind it wherever you are in the process within your organization, whenever you have to explain that, because you had your primary data, you are not relying on secondary data. Remember, in enterprise situation, for example, a sales engineer is just a voice. He's not a customer. He or she is not a customer. The customer is a customer. It's a distinct entity, and we should, if you're not talking directly to the customers, then you would never develop a good problem statement or definition. Next one, mostly there's not a single persona. A good problem statement should come from multiple personas. You should aggressively identify personas and develop use case for each one of them. They might be important, less important, but it will give you a round flavor of the problem statement. Next, know your competition. Substitution products are usually missed. There are simple things folks can do to solve their problem, and sometimes we consciously avoid because we are invested in the problem statement as product managers. And the last one is that you, of course, develop a big picture which anybody can explain. You can explain on the back of an envelope. Why does it matter? What is the problem? What is the high-level solution? What the space it is in? If you have this, you have a very concrete idea of describing a problem and market definition. So with that, I will stop here, and Vibhor, let me know what the questions are, and we can take it from there. So looks like there's a question from Pawan Velluri. And the question for benefit of everybody is, if the research starts with talking to customer and the primary data being said important, in a practical scenario, customers are not ready to talk the requirement, then expect the product company to dictate. So how do we solve the chicken and egg scenario? So here's what it was. And so thanks for Pawan for asking this question. From my experience, if a customer is not able to describe a problem, then we have a problem there. I think what you will find mostly is, and when you're talking about requirement, is you are looking in terms of they're not able to describe what they want in terms of a solution. Look, requirements are tied to solutions. At this point of time, you are focusing on defining the problem. They should be able to say what bothers them. Forget about what a solution would be. For example, in our last example, the problem was the timeliness. I was not asking the customer that whether he needs an alarm clock or not. That is my interpretation of what could solve the problem. But the problem was timeliness. And it should be possible to get that cleared. And you need to avoid any solution discussion at that point of time. Let's go to the next question then. We have a question from Sai Ganesh. What is your take on creating solutions to a problem that adds value, but it is very hard to attach a dollar value to it? So I think that's a great question. So again, as I said, not every problem is worth solving because there is only one metric, which means the metric cannot be just that what is the dollar opportunity. In some cases, it would be expansion of the user base. It might be you need to just do this because you want to exist in this market because your competitors are having it. In some cases, this might be the feature in which you might be chosen for a contract or not. So not everything might be related to a clear dollar value. You have to sometimes articulate a competitive value for this. It might be engaging new users, giving value sometimes to advertisers, let's say in a consumer platform. So it's not important to have a dollar value. And in my experience, half of the problem statements are hardly tied to with a dollar share. So if you're not getting it, don't worry too much about it. But you should be able to say what else it achieves. So we have next question. This is Rahul Malik from Visa. Can you please elaborate more on the importance of unbiased discovery and open-ended question? So this is important. A lot of time, and I will give you an example. I have been into security for years, and one of the cases in which one of the situations we got stuck in, that we were looking at a lot of feature requests coming in from customers who were complaining, who were saying that we have a problem with your management dashboard, and we are trying to search for some of the things and we are not able to find. And they were almost constituting 33% of the feature requests that I was getting. And I could have simply taken that as a command, but we went back to talk to the customers and try to understand what exactly you're trying to do. And it was an open-ended question. It was unbiased discovery. And we figured out they were trying to do they had other product that were using alongside our security product. That was not working. So they were relying back on my system to do the job of secondary product. And that's where in their head, they were asking for a targeted solution, which we thought that was not our primary space. So when we heard from this unbiased discovery, rather than focusing on what exactly they were looking from a feature perspective, we discovered they were looking for a completely new product, and we discovered and we were able to launch that. So the next one is Prakash Dhanapalan. Out of 4 steps, which particular steps would take more time to execute? I think the most time usually takes the first step when you are discovering a problem, because that sometimes takes over many meetings, many research. You won't get the meetings with the customers or multiple stakeholders. So that should be the one that takes most amount of time. The questions are coming very fast, so let me pick. We have Amit Pandey. Do we have different ways to look for problem which require disruptive solution? No, we don't. So some of the times when you restrain yourself to do unbiased discovery, at that point of time you might come across a lot of blue ocean things. And blue ocean sometimes to your company, but sometimes blue ocean is generally a new area of solution. I don't think there is a particular way when you are trying to find that out. You will develop a sense of what problem. I think let me take it back. I think the more important thing is when you do unbiased discovery and you are more in a sense situation, you will start to see things that you were not seeing because initially you were only looking for solution, not for the problem statement. If you start looking for a problem statement, irrespective of whether your organization is there or not, you will discover new or maybe what you call as disruptive problem statements. So next one is Sai Prakash Belsare. In large enterprises, customers are far too away. Geography and org structure wise, sales would say yes. We do talk to customers all the time. However, it's an unstated belief that talking to a customer is too artistic. How do we move enterprise elephant to first talk to customer? Look, this is a problem that you have to solve. In some cases, one of the things I have a golden rule. In my organization, if my product managers are coming to me that my sales engineer is saying this or my sales guy is saying this, that is never accepted as that I can move a proposal. So I will reject that out of hand. In most of the scenarios, they can only point to me towards the existing of a problem statement. But if I can't find a customer to state that problem, we have a big issue. This is not even an idealistic thing. This has just become, in my view, some kind of a lazy scenario, in which because I'm not able to fight for getting back to the customers, so I start accepting sales engineer's opinion as a proxy to a customer opinion. And in most of you, if it's your own career. And if you can't get to the customers, you will never become a very valuable customers. The next one is Adarsh Agarwal. Your view of launching a product when and situation when time to market is very less. I think that's a different question, not kind of in the scope. So at this point of time, please, I will apologize that I would skip this as of now. The next question we have is Anirban Das. Sometimes the customer is not able to see the problem themselves. Is it a good idea to show the problem to the customer for which the solution is already available? So this is a great question. So when you say sometimes the customer is not able to see the problem themselves, and I think the assumption here is that you are able to see the problem while he is not able to see the problem. In my view, that would be what I call as aided discovery, or a leading question discovery, which is a problematic thing, which means you are helping customer to discover a problem for themselves, which is a very dangerous thing to do. Number one. But you might be able to say that one of my customers is able to see the problem, my second customer is not able to see. That might be a more valid scenario. So in this case, you might take, and this is what I call a development hypothesis. For some of the customers, based on the feedback, who are more have a better realization of self or of their problem statements, you might pick up the problem statement and develop a hypothesis, and then go to a much broader set of customers to say that some of the customers saying this is a problem, this is a hypothesis. Do you guys agree? They might agree or they might disagree, and based on that, you would have a test of a hypothesis. But if none of your customer is able to see the problem and only you are able to see, then boy, we have a problem. I will go back to the question from Amit Pandey. Do we have a different way to look for problem which require disruptive solution? One of the things I want to caution you is do not look for solutions. Do not start from solutions. That itself is a biased way of seeking a problem statement, and that is where a lot of us go wrong. We have a question from George. How often do we have to validate a hypothesis? I would say every time you are looking at a new problem statement. It might be a feature level, it might be a big product level. It is important to validate your hypothesis. Uh, this is your primary data. You will create your castle of your strategy, your product strategy based on the primary data. That is like a foundation. If it is not strong, you can get into problems, serious problems later on. So if look at your, a lot of you who have come from engineering background, this is a design bug. There are wrong hypotheses. If you have a wrong hypothesis, then you will get into problems later on. So we have Sangeeta Mishra. She's asking, I've seen a lot of times that many change requests are taken ahead for implementation, even without they being approved the change control board. And while it's a process, we realize at the end of the implementation that there is a customer review, they're not aligned to what is done and want the team to go back to start. Actually, you just said what I was saying is that these are what I will call the requirement bugs. So just like engineering has a life cycle, the product managers also have a life cycle. If you have not validated a problem statement or you have created a wrong hypothesis, you have created a bug at the start of the process, which becomes a very expensive bug when engineering gets involved, where time is spent. So you actually have you are responsible for the bug that was generated as part of your process. So that's a great observation. We have Suresh BG. Generally, how many customers we need to talk to pick the proper problem statement? So I think this is a great question. This depends on whether you are an enterprise or consumer. If you are in an enterprise setting, I think it should be a reasonable chunk of your customer base. Sometimes it's 8, 10, 15. It's hard to answer, but it should be a 10, 20% of your customer base that should be seeing the same problem. Because then you move away from saying it's a particular customer specific problem to a market problem. One of the more important thing is we have always talked about market problems. Multiple customers say they have a problem. One customer saying a problem is not good enough. It's not a good sized problem to solve for an organization. But you're a consumer, it should be many users. It has to be much bigger bulk, and I think you will get a very good idea of what is the minimum size of the customer base is required. Again, at 10 to 20%, 20% is a reasonable enough size to say that if 20% of customers will feel the same problem, it's a sizable chunk that is good and interesting enough for you to solve. Next one is Lokesh K. I'm also a cybersecurity product manager. How would you handle one of the key metrics, false positive versus false negative in a cybersecurity product? I think you are focusing again here on the solution side of things. I think at this point of time, I think maybe you want to rephrase the problem statement from the scope of this. Most of these things, let me try to take an attempt. If you're saying that your customers are seeing the problems of false positives or false negative, it's the same thing. If more than see reasonable size of folks have a problem with their false positive rate or a false negative rate, then you have a good enough problem statement. But I still don't understand the full scope of what you're trying to ask. So Fanikar Bhaskara, are all the steps equally important? I think all of the steps are important, but most important is the core step. How do you discover these problem statements? Most of us start from a solution and then we go back to the customer to say, is it a good solution? Is it a great solution? But we don't even start to diagnose, was there a problem to begin with that you discovered on your own rather than some sales guy telling you or some technical guy telling you that in my head there's a problem and this is a great solution. That's not a great way to discover problems or even to take a feedback from customers. So the next one is, there's a repeat question from Sai Prakash Balsare. A little technical question. What will be the specific effective way to validate the market problem hypothesis in one-to-one customer interaction slide deck or storyboard or something else? That's a great question. I think more than the slide deck, a wireframe or a storyboard of the problem statement that you believe that you discovered, or a hypothesis even that you discovered would be a good thing. Too much slide decks and you will lose the interest of customers. And again, this is my experience, but a couple of good story decks which describes that this is the interaction that he has. Let's say, go back to the alarm clock example that I just gave. So if you are able, I mean, in case of blind person, you of course have to talk that through. But if you have any other case, you might create a storyboard, and you can say you are doing this step 1, then you went to step 2, then you went to the step 3, and between step 2 and step 3, you had a problem, and this is your problem. Do you relate with this problem, or you don't relate with this problem? And if that person is able to relate, he or she, he will give you a lot more details around that. If he says, no, I don't have a problem, then you again validated the hypothesis that it is false. So I think we have, I have answered almost all of the question. So we still have around 8 minutes. So if anyone of you have any more questions, I'm happy to take them. But I think one of the things I will again give you a thing. Do not start from solutions. A lot of us think that's a great technological output. Some architect came to us, or some sales engineer take to us. These are self-fulfilling prophecies. They do not take you to solve a real problem. And most of the times when we were in early stages of our career, we used to confuse the solutions with the problem statement. So unaided discovery, unbiased discovery is extremely important, and focus on personas. A lot of us don't do that in the early stage of career, and then we got into a struggle. So I think if we don't have any questions, then Vibhor, back to you.
Thank you, Alok. And we are getting some good comments for you, Alok. People are liking this session. My only submission to the attendees is you will see a survey form after this webinar on your screen. Please do give us a survey, and it will also be part of your follow-up email. Please do send your feedbacks, because this helps us to improvise our sessions better. And with this, Alok, thank you very much. Thank you very much to spend your midnight hours with us. I understand it takes a good toll on you to do this session at this hour in your time zone. And thank you, everyone, all the attendees to attend the session. We look forward to your feedback.
Thank you, guys.